Today we will talk about the dual role of CI/CD pipeline. As a delivery system, this is the engine that powers delivery with fast and stable builds, tests, and deployments. As a key part of developer experience, it affects productivity, morale, and team spirit. Balancing these two roles is key to unlocking the full potential of a CI/CD pipeline. With our wonderful guests, we'll explore this dual role and discuss the metrics and strategies to achieve balance and drive action. Let's get started. I am Anita, CEO at Network Perspective, very excited to welcome our expert guests. Dmitry, Jon, thanks for joining us. Can you share a bit about yourselves?
Go ahead, Dmitry, if you like.
Okay. Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you all. My name is Dmitry. I'm a Deputy Head of Research and Development Department at Devexperts. So I started my career as an engineer in telecommunications sphere. I worked with fiber optic, and I wrote some programs in MATLAB, primarily that kind of exotic stack, I would put it that way. Then I changed my career track to management. In the IT companies, I've been a chief operating officer of outsourced company, and now I'm in charge of research and development department at Devexperts. I love to experiment and to work on developers' productivity, developers' experience, Gen AI side of things, and a lot of other stuff. And of course, I think that CI/CD plays crucial role in developers' productivity and software productivity in general. So yeah, that's me. Nice to meet you all. So Jon.
Wow, that's fantastic. I I remember messing around with MATLAB a long time ago. Kind of a cool platform to do crazy stuff. And I like the fact that your arc of your experience has touched on really hardcore problems and not only technical, but then I'm sure especially with like outsourcing and things like that, a lot of the people side of things. So that's really cool. Myself started as an aeronautical engineer, testing cruise missile engines and flight simulation, centrifuge, man-in-the-loop type stuff. Created my own software company. Then created another one with Peter Code, who was my object-oriented mentor. We ended up creating TogetherSoft and selling it later. But it was a fantastic opportunity to work with a team in Russia. So I had a lot of good experiences in St. Petersburg. And it led me to also to the famous mountain where we were. My Defense Department days taught me to create a lightweight Agile, what we now call Agile methodology, and especially what we did with TogetherSoft and whatnot. So built a lot of products. My favorite is I'm working with firefighters, so I'm kind of repping a firefighter shirt. Build a web app for firefighters. That's my passion project that I still do. And at Adaptivist, we work to help. Well, my little piece of it. Most of it is Atlassian type products and things like that. But my piece is trying to help teams learn better ways of working to deliver more value to customers and have fun doing it. So that's kind of my passion.
Thanks, guys. And let's kick off our talk with the CI/CD pipeline as a delivery system. Metrics like build times, failure rates, and queue lengths are key for checking pipeline performance and finding bottlenecks. These metrics offer quite a general view, but choosing the right ones, actionable and easy to understand, can be tricky. Their meaning often depends on the context, even though we intuitively expect precise and objective results. So let's start with some context. Dmitry, could you give us an overview of the CI/CD system you manage?
Yeah, for sure, Anita. So I think it's really crucial to share a context because the right or the wrong solution heavily depends on the context. So here is my context and the context of a company where I work. So we have a CI/CD pipeline which is in charge of testing everything. Well, we have all kind of tests like end-to-end test, integrational tests, unit tests, you name it. Right, and it's in charge of deploys as well, deploys and releases. We have only on-premise builds, so it's also crucial to understand that we don't have clouds for our CI/CD system, and we might have different kind of challenges, struggles, and advantages because of that fact. The next thing that I would like to mention is that during 2024, we had more than 1 million builds in our system, so it's quite a heavy load in my opinion. And only 2.5 engineers, DevOps engineers, were in charge of this system. So I think it's quite a good return on investment per se, right? And a little bit of information about the company. Devexperts works with fintech capital markets. So we do have our own products, and we build projects on top of these products, primarily for banks, brokers, and other fintech companies. So we have a lot of products and projects that were formed from these products. That's also important to understand because we have a lot of build configurations per se, a lot of projects. So yeah, I guess that's it on a high level. This is our CI/CD system, and again, I consider it crucial for overall productivity of us as a software vendor.
So, Dmitry, based on your chart, could you explain what key system metrics you use and why you've chosen those metrics?
Yeah. So basically, I would like to start with the story, perhaps, right? Because these metrics were born because of some circumstances, and not just because of some theory, but because of our real struggles, challenges, and goals. So I guess that happened. This system was born like 2 or 3 years ago, when we faced a heavy overload of our CI/CD system because we started a lot of new projects, but our capacity in terms of servers, in terms of builders, remains the same. And we faced a huge queue, right? So engineers could wait for their builds for quite a long period of time, and they were not happy about it. So they wrote a lot of emails and so on and so forth. So, and I've decided to step up and to help to resolve this issue. So basically, we resolved this issue. We bought new servers. We did some kind of upgrades, yada yada. But basically, after a fire, you should think how to prevent it, right? And we set and we created this metrics. So first things first, it's a queue size, right? So if engineers told you that the queue is huge and it prevents them from doing their job, basically, then maybe it makes sense to check this queue regularly, right? So, and we decided to start checking it, and it became our main metric. Then there are reasons behind this queue, right? We have a limited number of builders. So probably if the build takes too long, then you cannot build like too many other configurations because of that. And we started to monitor our heaviest builds, so basically to free our builders. And like the third and the fourth layer is just about like regular monitoring of things, how things are done, like regular monitoring of our services and regular monitoring of low-level kind of things like CPU, network, and so on and so forth, because this third and fourth level, it supports previous two, right? Just to make sure that everything works fine infrastructure-wise. So I guess this is it in a nutshell. This is our metrics that we use daily. So maybe you have some questions or comments. Let me know.
Attendees, please share your questions or experiences in the chat, and Jon What's your perspective on this?
Yeah, so I think just to make it clear, when you talk about the queue size, you mean if you have dozens of developers committing and pushing, you're talking about the things that are stacking up in your pipeline, the requests that are waiting to be processed.
Yes. So they're just stuck in waiting for start their build, basically.
Right.
So it's kind of a waste if we're talking
Yeah.
like Kanban wise.
The one thing that I'd like to try to tease out is I had a group that I was working with a while back casually mentioned in one of the meetings something that caught my ear, and it had to do with build failures. I was like, wait, what did you say you do every morning? Well, we go in and we look, to manually look at the build failures. And then, kind of whoever gets there first might do it. It might be me, it might be someone else. So as I dug deeper, because it was foreign to me, so to speak, that some of the things I started seeing and hearing, I eventually found over the course of a couple of years, because I just started to quickly look and search in this like log. And I was like, wow, there's like 7,000 build failures. Admittedly, it was over a couple of years, but I'm thinking, I've for sure in my entire career, I've not seen 7,000 build failure. Now, admittedly, I don't work on huge systems with thousands of but neither do these people, right? So I'm thinking to myself, you just said something where, because if I was a developer on the team, I'd be freaking out. I'd be like, all right, stop. Like, what are we doing? And why are we tolerating this for years? Like, right, that's like, you said your developers, somebody spoke up and said, hey, yeah, we got to do something. This is not a good experience, right? That's kind of what I'm getting at. It's not a good experience. And so was there, I guess what I'm asking is a little bit about the culture, a little bit about, like, for agility to flourish and for value to, come forth out of the team, you have to have the right culture and environment to be able to speak up. So are you able to think back to that time, or even maybe now, like what enabled such sort of a low-level developer to say, this sucks, we need help?
Yeah. So that's actually a nice question. So culture-wise, we at Devexperts are very like engineering-centric. The company was built by engineers, and it has really strong engineering culture. And it's all about engineers because we don't
Go
have
engineers. Yeah.
we don't have anything else, basically, right? So yeah, and we always, as managers, we try to hear feedback from our team. And also one thing that supports that kind of culture and maybe enables it, maybe making it more precise as feedback, is that we launched a developers experience survey. I guess it was a year and a half ago. And it helps us to really understand, like step by step, thing by thing, what actually bothers our developers, what prevents them from doing their job, from writing good code and shipping it to production, right? So I think that also something important. But first things first, it's of course the fact that company was started by engineers, and it was always about engineers and engineers. Yeah.
When we are talking about developer experience surveys, what questions, Dmitry, do you ask in the context of CI/CD builds, and what insights do you gain?
So basically, we have in our developer surveys, we have two types of questions. We have like purely subjective type of question, like what do you think about the reliability and stability of our CI/CD pipeline? And the second thing from this type is basically how satisfied are you with our build process, and that's it. And the second type is kind of a subjective objective metric. I don't know how to call it, but basically we are asking during the last quarter, what was the longest time of you waiting for a build to actually be completed? That's the first thing. And the second thing that we ask is actually how often did you encounter test flakiness during the last quarter? That's the second question from this type. So basically we have, I think these 4 questions in our developers experience survey. I think that now our build process has like the highest ranking, the highest satisfaction rate among all other developers experience drivers that we have. Yeah, and that's something that I find really cool and I'm proud about it actually. So yeah.
And Jon, from your point of view, how do surveys add value beyond system metrics?
Well, one funny thought crossed my mind. I love having the opportunity to get the voice, sort of anonymously from a survey. But a funny thought crossed my mind at the same time, Dmitry, when you mentioned, what was the longest time you experienced, something like that. Hopefully they also told you right after it happened, versus depending on when the survey comes, right? So, but part of it is to surface that which might be hard to say, so that you can get potentially a more, let's just say more statistical, even if it's a Likert scale, you at least can get something that you can monitor over time and as a consistent kind of we ask these questions. It's a little bit like for my firefighter app. I use the NPS. I know some people think it's dopey, but you know what? It freaking works. I pay attention to it, mostly 9s and 10s, and sometimes like a 0 because firefighter just fat fingered it and oh no, I was just trying to close it or something. But the point is, at least it's an opportunity to get some input. And hopefully folks are also on the ground with their ears to the ground, paying attention. And if you do find something out in a survey that you wish you would have learned earlier, that's an opportunity that you just learned. And you can say, hey, thanks, or whoever said this, feel free, please, to say it sooner in person, to whatever, right? To start to build that culture of we want to do the best we can. We want that information sooner. I often joke that the simplest way to think of Agile is reducing the gap in time between taking an action and getting feedback. So, that's in the spirit of, get that feedback sooner. Yeah, they can be very powerful ways to watch trends, get information you might not get otherwise. But they're also just like any kind of test, or they're not the truth per se. We are not a number, but it's certainly certain parts of the survey can be very, let's say, factual, so to speak, and others are, like Dmitry said, a feeling, which is okay too.
And Dmitry, do you use DevEx survey results in any way to define where the good enough line is for your developers? Just to know,
Sorry? Just to know what? Sorry?
Just to know where the good enough line lies for experiences you are trying to optimize.
Yeah, it's actually, yes. So we try to define good enough, but sometimes it's interesting to see how good enough for people within the company who have been with company for a long period of time is like kind of lagging behind good enough for the market. And that's something interesting, and that's something that is good to address as well. But yes, of course, we don't have like endless people and less budget, so we have to prioritize, right? And if it's good enough now, we have other things that are not that good, that requires like immediate attention, fixing, improving, and so on and so forth. But there might be really interesting insights if you combine developers' experience survey within the company with some kind of market-wise benchmarks. It also gives you a different point of view on these results.
Yes, exactly. That was great.
Yeah,
John?
sorry, Anita. I was just gonna say I love that good enough, right? Because that implies you don't need to be perfect. You don't, like you can dial in different. I mean, it almost sounds blasphemous to say you can dial in different levels of quality, but sometimes you can, and sometimes, yeah, it's from an engineering point of view, treating things more holistically as a system, and especially if you understand, we like optimizing for a single point. Maybe we need to do that, but maybe not, right? So like, that's actually a really valuable phrasing of helping people realize that there can be some judgment as to this is good enough. Like we can get 80% of what we're after for 20% of the effort, the classic Pareto style. Let's try that. Because that's one of my tricks is we don't know as much as we think we do. That might be good enough, even though the customer asked for this, or we want this in our build pipeline, or we want, but maybe 80% of this might make all kinds of things go away, and we saved, we only spent 20% of the effort. So we saved that other, capacity to do something else. So that's a really, probably a commonly unasked question. And so it is a danger of engineering. We can, asymptotically approach awesomeness. Well, and meanwhile, we passed the good enough point a long time ago. So yeah, there's a little danger of being an engineer too.
Thank you. So let's move to the final part of proxy metrics and why optimizing experiences is different from optimizing systems. Dmitry, you've already mentioned your proxy metric queue size, which works best for you in indicating delays and predicting build times. For developers, expected 30 minutes build time is better than uncertain waits of 5 to 55 minutes. And predictability waits harm planning, cause frustration, waste time, and add stress, impacting much more than just release efficiency. So, Dmitry, you've created a proxy metric for queue size, prioritizing usefulness over accuracy, I might say. And here is your next chart. Can you explain your way of thinking and provide the details, how you build the metric, set the threshold, and use it to drive improvements?
Yes, Anita, absolutely. So again, we've decided to measure and to monitor the queue size. I can dive a little bit deeper about the topic, how we are doing it currently. But anyway, we've chose our queue size as basically our North Star metric. But in reality, it's actually a proxy metric because it's not that interesting how long is a queue before you, right? For you, the only thing that matters is what kind of delay is going to be caused by this queue size, right? So actually, when we are measuring the queue size, we are kind of proxy measuring the delay that is caused by this queue to a certain build. Why we are using queue size instead of using like pure queue delay? Because it's actually really hard and really tricky to calculate the queue delay. So because basically delay is going to be different for different builds because they have different position in the queue, right? So should we measure average delay? Should we measure mean delay? Should we measure like percentiles? And when it's getting that kind of complicated and complex, it's really hard to make some actions afterwards. So I prefer simplicity over complexity because it's more actionable, right? It's easier to work with the queue size. It's easier to optimize it. And naturally, if you reduce the queue size, your queue delay will be reduced as well. That's kind of obvious, right? So, and yeah, our total build time basically consists of the build time itself and the delay that is caused by a queue. So we can work with build times. There are different kind of techniques and technologies to do that. For example, we are trying build caching or incremental builds now. But before that, we will like to make sure that we reduced our queue as good as we can, that we optimize it as good as we can. Why? Because queue causes some predictability, right? Again, I mentioned it in my LinkedIn post, because when you have queue, you don't know how long would it take for your build to actually be completed. It could be like 5 minutes, it could be 10 minutes, it could be 15, it could be 55. And when you have like a standard build and you know it's gonna take like 50 minutes to build it, well, you have the predictability at least, right? So first things first, work with predictability. It's key, it's crucial. I think it was mentioned in some of the research papers by Google. So this is why we are focused on the queue size, just to make it predictable. And that's our first thing, our first priority, and then comes the build time itself. I hope I answered your question and explained this simple diagram.
Any questions or comments in the chat? We'll get to them shortly. And Jon, any thoughts to share?
Yeah, Dmitry, I think one of the things that I've always strived for from the development side of things is a level of confidence that if I ran tests locally, let's say, right? So I do my work, push it, commit and push after I ran all my local tests. I have a fairly high confidence. And matter of fact, like sometimes you end up with flaky tests and, maybe initially you just flag them as intermittent and try not to, figure them out later. But how, in some sense, when I've got confidence and the team has confidence that what I've produced works locally and I got trust in my system, we push, and I might be so confident I'll pick up the next task. Mostly because the dev channel in Slack, for example, those failures are going to get splatted in our face shortly if there's build failures. And then, so although sometimes if there's something tricky going on, you might wait, especially to your point, if you have confidence, because all right, let's see if this passes the freaking actual, the builds. I'm skeptical, so I might go get a coffee or go to lunch or do something. But yeah, how do your teams approach the sort of that confidence level, so that I'm not having to wait so much for the build? Or yeah, I guess I'm wondering how easy is it to take my local experience as a predictor for the build experience?
Right. So we do have, of course, our developers are able to run tests locally, but the thing is we have quite a lot of tests, and it might take a lot of time and computational power to do that. So sometimes usually it's better to run on a CI/CD pipeline. And speaking about levels of confidence, so I think it heavily depends on the nature of the build. If it's just unit tests for merge into some random branch, that might be okay. That's one level of confidence. If it's gonna be a release deployed to production, and probably you're gonna be more skeptical and would like to check things more. So I think it depends on the nature of the build as well.
So it's time for your final thoughts. And I have two big questions for you. First one, why is optimizing experiences different from optimizing systems? Jon, would you like to take it first?
Man. Well, I think on the surface, certainly what, like, all right, unless we like torture, we want to build a smooth, wonderful system to have as good of experience as possible while we're working to be able to do our best. And I think it even adds to the word that's coming to my mind is like the camaraderie, right? There's a, even a build failure coming into the dev channel and, seeing person saying, I got this. There's something about, that's an experience, right? We feel that's cool. We're a team. Patrick said he's on it, probably because it was his code. But I think the reason that I would favor that being the driver is because so much of what we do is, I would always joke that software would be easier if it weren't for all the people, but there are all the people. So we should make it about us in some sense and fix the system to meet kind of our needs, not the other way around, so to speak. In other words, I would prefer we're the driver towards, like Dmitry said, we want predictability. Why? Because I want to know, is it a 5-minute coffee break, or do I have to go out to lunch before I wait for this thing or whatever? Predictability is helpful, right? It reduces our stress, so to speak. So yeah, I think that's probably the biggest reason, is because, we need to be more human-centric to recognize for us to do our best work, we need to think about us as a big integral part of the system anyway, versus just the nuts and bolts.
And Dmitry,
yeah,
what's your point of view?
Great insights from Jon. First of all, I think that good people, well, actually systems are built by people, right? And if you have good people and you have good processes and your good people have good experience, right, they will be able to build any kind of system and optimize it in any kind of ways that you would like to. So it's people first, right? Because you cannot build systems without people. So yeah, I think people should be a main focus.
So here is my next question. What's the best way to measure development practices, keeping in mind that optimizing experiences is a different game from optimizing systems?
So I can start here and share my thoughts because I had a lot of like iterations around objective measurements of code, like code review time, PR size, whatsoever. And at the end of the day, it doesn't seem like it worked in a way that I would expect. Then I switched my personal approach to measuring the actual experience, developers' experience, and maybe sometimes to combine this subjective feedback from engineers with some kind of objective data from our systems, but from like just particular systems, not all of our systems, right? And I think that's the best way to measure something, is to actually combine objective measurements with subjective experiences and surveys. But like surveys and experiences should be in the first place, because at the end of the day, if you have some measurements, right? If you have some objective measurements, the next thing you want to do, you want to improve it, right? You want to optimize it. And how do you do that? First, you should understand how does this data is being collected, right? To do that, you need to talk with people, right? Next thing, you have to define like bottlenecks. And to do that, you most probably have to talk with people and plan some actions with people. So I just think that we can just cut to the chase straight away and just ask people, what do you think prevents you from doing your job better? And in my opinion, it works really, really well, this approach of subjective feedback and developers' experience surveys and like some action items afterwards.
Yeah, great points. It makes me think of the objective metrics, failure rates, and the DORA metrics, or any one you want to pick. Those are lagging indicators in every sense. So from the perspective, how can you affect those? Yeah, it goes back to kind of what we've been talking about. It really, how can we set up an environment where it's not punitive for me to be accountable? All right, geez, I screwed up. Or, matter of fact, that's the best thing I can often do with a team is screw up and show that it's okay. We're human. And to build that sense of it's a team sport. So for what Dmitry is saying is the being on the ground with the people, really understanding what's going on. That's the best measure. And I like to try to do things that avoid problems versus reacting to the problem. I mean, that sounds stupid, like who doesn't? But at the same time, we so often don't. It's so much better to make sure that every new developer we onboard, gets inculcated with a culture of, yeah, we understand we're all trying to do our best. We want to help you do your best. We want to make the experience as good as possible for you to succeed and excel and offer. And there's so much that goes into that, way before measuring, so to speak. Yeah, I mean, it's if there's a problem, it's usually, I would take it somewhat personally that we didn't do enough to help somebody to avoid whatever happened. Okay, let's figure out how to fix that. Sometimes it's fix it in the process, but other times it's fix it in the humanware, the wetware or whatever someone might call it. But yeah, definitely, I agree, Dmitry.
Thank you very much. And we are coming to the end. We have one comment, I guess. And maybe we can get to that. But no, it's not a question, it's just a comment. So I will probably ask you for your final thoughts. And we are coming to the end.
Yeah, Anita, I see a question from Steve left
Ah.
in Q&A section. So should we address it
Yes.
right now?
Yes, that would be great.
Okay, so the question is, do you measure code review wait time or recommend pairing to minimize code review wait time? Often we have various signers that can introduce delays. How do you measure this friction and adjust processes for fast flow? I feel these non-technical queues often introduce more delays than the actual build queue and cause frustration for developers. Yes, so we actually do at least try to measure it, but again, subjectively in our developers' experience surveys. Regarding code review wait time, yes, it's a kind of a pain point. In my opinion, the code review should be done, or maybe design reviews could be helpful as well. because it's actually easier to check something in the beginning of the process and to improve it rather than in the end. So yeah, non-technical cues and some like handovers within the team, like from analysts to developers. Of course, they do actually affect a lot of things, and we are trying to measure it by asking developers various questions regarding processes, regarding like again analytics and that kind of stuff. So yeah, hope I answered your question.
Yeah, it's a great question, Steve, about the classic. I do my work, I make a feature branch, I do my work, I create a pull request, and whatever order you want. The point is there's some delay. There's some, now I gotta ask people to review my code, which is a good thing quite often. But that is a delay because oftentimes teams end up, speaking of queue size, that Dmitry points out, there's a queue, the pull request list, and sometimes it gets out of hand, and sometimes I remember the team would say, all right, before you start whatever it is in the morning, please check the pull request stack and do an hour's worth of code review or something like that. Move things along. So I think the first point, Steve, is if you want to measure that, you can. So if sometimes I typically always use Jira just because I've been using it forever, but you can add what I might call those shoulder states or something like that, because if to measure the time in this particular status, like you have to make it visible, because a lot of times I try to keep things super simple in terms of a workflow. But if you said this, if we spotted this and our status was really simple, it's to do, in progress, under review and done, done. But you wanted this, you'd have to put in something that says, now I'm in this code review state. You'd be able to track it. And then that's, what we start to pay attention to allows us to, apply some intention of trying to fix it or figure out what to do. And to your point, sometimes Dmitry is doing my favorite thing, avoiding it by doing something earlier. Or Steve, what you're saying, like pairing, like how about we mix the two instead of finding out something wrong. And another trick is if you don't mix the two, do smaller things. The worst thing is not doing enough upfront help to maybe shape the approach. And it's a big thing. And it's, 40 files are touched and someone's been working on it for 2 weeks. All right, you lost me. There you go. You made the bed that you're laying in now. So, stop doing that. So another way is to make it short and not so painful, Steve, where that, the code review isn't hard to do, because who wants to raise their hand and do a code review of a huge commit? That's the worst, right? Anyway, hope that answered the question, Steve.
So Dmitry, Jon, thank you. And thanks to everyone for joining us. I hope you enjoyed as much as I did. Thank you, and see you during the next DevEx talk.
It was great. Great chatting.
Thank you, Jon. Thank you.
Thank you, Dmitry. Thank you, Jon.
Thank you.
Have a great day.